welcome to TMG Live, semi-live. I feel like we should have full disclosure. We are recording.
Yes, we should. We can't pretend like we're live when we're not.
We're not live. But if you comment below, we'll still reply to them.
Yep.
Maybe live.
We're just slightly ahead of the live. The pre-recorded this week due to scheduling conflicts, but we wanted to be able to get some good content out still.
That's right. This is really important episode. Are we calling these episodes?
We haven't, but we can start.
Okay. All right. Really important because we're talking about change management. So there's, I don't want to go into a big spiel, but a lot of people feel like, a lot of people in the church world feel like churches can't change, which, or don't want to, which we just sort of fundamentally disagree with that. We think that churches can change. We know it because we've seen it lots of times. Small churches, not so small churches, all of them can change. But change is not easy, and change is really important. And so what we wanted to tackle today, AJ and I, is what do we do when people resist change? Because churches want to change, but individuals within a church sometimes don't want to change, or they fight against it or feel uncomfortable. So what we want to tackle today is what do we do when people resist change? And we've got 5 sort of change management hacks. How about that?
Sure. Yeah. This is a list that we've used for quite a while. This was originally out of some of Dr. Malfer's work related to people barriers in the church, various barriers that churches come across attempting to implement change. So these are 5 things related to people barriers. And also to kind of set this up with a little bit more detail, this is not resistant to like the conversation of change or trying to figure out what needs to change or how. We're really kind of talking about on the implementation side of change. So
you've already agreed to change,
right? Yeah, decisions have been made. It's been recognized by the leadership of the church and already garnered support, by the majority of the congregation. So the church has made a decision to make some changes. Then that doesn't mean it's over though, right? Because we're dealing with people. So, so as you come across things, that's that. So that's kind of, I guess that's a lot of setup. Seems like we're getting really nichey here, but we're not. This is actually quite general. So with that, let's jump into number 1, Scott, of people barriers attempting to implement change in the church.
Yeah. So the first thing is push ahead and don't give in. So we see this a lot in churches. The first time someone sends a nasty email, first time someone who gives a lot of money threatens to leave the church, if the church changes the Sunday school to small groups or changes the music or changes anything, they'll say, well, I'm going to leave. Well, you might just have to let them go. The thing is, you intrinsically know this as a parent. If you're a parent, once you make a decision as a parent, you have to follow through. Otherwise, the kids won't trust you. And I'm not trying to say that the people in your church are kids, but God has appointed you as a leader in the church as an under shepherd under Jesus Christ, and they are sheep. And God has charged you with the job of herding the sheep towards Jesus. And so, if you start taking advice from the sheep when they're bucking against where you believe God is leading you, then that's not a good thing. So you got to push ahead and don't give in just because someone threatens. You got to believe that if we're following God's voice and He's calling us in a direction, then if someone who has big, deep pockets, they threaten to leave the church, you have to believe that God's going to cover that. If they go, God's going to provide. You don't be a slave to any person or family's opinion.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's especially as the leader of a church. Our beloved friend and CEO Ron Danini typically refers to this as requiring intestinal fortitude. So it takes guts. You've got to have the stomach for it to just really to stand strong after leadership decisions have been made. Yep. So, there you go. Number 1 is push ahead. Don't give in.
That sounds simple, but it's really hard to do.
It's a tough one.
All right. Number 2, AJ, grab this one.
Number 2 is respect those who are disagreeing with you, but openly disagree with them.
Mhm.
So we never want to lose an element of respect in conversation. We want to be grown up about this. We want to be we want to be biblical in how we deal with confrontation and with division and things like that. But when there's issues going on, we also don't want to look like maybe we're on somebody's side or understanding your concerns, and then later say, hey, that's wrong. Not that we want to be openly argumentative.
You're not trying to throw anybody under the bus.
Yeah. But
at the
we're
same
not trying
time,
to be
you got to openly
secretive.
disagree with
That's
people.
Right. We just have to handle things maturely, but sometimes need to handle them openly as well, for the benefit of those also in the conversation, so that it doesn't get out of hand.
I was working with a church not that long ago, and there was an opinion about something that just wasn't right. And so, as a tactic, as a guide with TMG, like one of the things I like to do is I'll say, I hear what you're saying and I understand why you feel that way, but you got to understand this does not work.
Mm-hmm.
This is dysfunctional, and this is why this is dysfunctional. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Am I understanding what you're saying? So you're trying to be respectful and say, I hear what you're saying and I think I get it, but I need you to understand that this is why this does not work. So there's a way to be respectful and to hear their concern, but still openly disagree and say, you're not right on this. That's a sort of an emotionally intelligent thing that's hard to do sometimes. And I'm not perfect at it by any means, but it's a skill that we can learn, I think, as leaders.
Yeah.
All right. Let's do number 3 here, which is confront and correct when necessary. Confront and correct. And by confront, I don't mean in sort of a mean way, but almost just get ahead of it. If there's misinformation or disinformation, which is really common anytime you're going from like any sort of a paradigm shift or change, there's misinformation and disinformation are common. So confronting means getting ahead of that. I was talking with a pastor this week, actually. He's a really skilled leader. I could learn a lot from him. They were making a change in how they're communicating their budget, and rather than waiting for the misinformation or disinformation to spread, he got ahead of it and sent an email and said, this is why we're doing it this way. And if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. But he sent that email before he let that sort of fester into a problem. So confront and engage in get ahead of problems.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important in change management. AJ, anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, have your ear to the ground always. Be listening to the information that's going through the church. You can't just get locked away in your office or ignore things like that. So you've got to be you have to maintain good relationships with people, maintain that trust. That provides you with good information. And that just in general helps support a healthy environment in the church anyway. But the better information that you're getting about what's being disseminated, the more easily it'll then be to correct any bad information out there. So maintain relationships. Maybe that's 3. That's 3B.
Right. Yeah, communicate well. All right, number 4, AJ.
Number 4, never tolerate sinful behavior. And probably, I guess, maybe the thing that comes to mind most in this point would be gossip.
Yeah.
So people that are being divisive in the church, sometimes unintentionally, but many times intentionally. They figure if they can build up, their own little private army, then they could swing things more in their favor. We know this happens. It's horrible that it does happen, but it does. And so that's another one, I guess, scene number 3, confront and correct. Whenever sinful behavior is going on, but we definitely can't tolerate that. I mean, that's a foothold for Satan to drive a wedge in the church and keep you from achieving your mission and vision of making disciples. So, we just can't tolerate sinful behavior.
One thing I feel like I should mention here is, respect but openly disagree is number 2, and that's about ideas. But if someone is being sinful and spreading gossip, which is different than someone just not understanding something correctly or having a difference of opinion, which is maybe idea-based. But if there's a character issue, probably don't deal with that one publicly.
True.
probably take that person aside, maybe confront them on the issue and say, that's not true. Actually, here's the facts. But then if you can tell that they're being gossipy on purpose, that you might want to deal with one-on-one and say, hey, what's going on? How's your heart?
You could be getting into a discipline issue.
Well, and it's just, that would be appropriate, right? Like I try and I do my best if we're in public and I got to discipline my kids to not do that in front of the whole grocery line.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I wait till I can be alone with my kid and deal with it. And again, I'm not trying to say that your congregation is your kids, but there are a lot of parallels between parenting and leading a church.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah. And we have excellent biblical model and standard for handling discipline in the church. And so, refer to God's word.
That's right. Yeah. See the Bible. And then number 5 is this. Number 5 is really, really, really important. And that's, you need to expose people to reality. Expose people to reality. Here's the reality. Between 94 and 95% of every church in the United States right now is in one of 3 buckets: declining, plateaued, or growing, but only through transfer growth. So sheep shuffling. Only 5 to 6% of churches in the U.S. are growing primarily through evangelistic growth. So that means most of the people who are watching this are in churches that are not growing in a healthy way, or maybe not growing at all. And people in your church very likely don't know that reality.
Yeah.
And you have a specific reality. Like, you have your own sort of context. I was talking to a church not that long ago. They've got a burn rate in terms of funds of just a handful of years. Right? But they've been going into their savings every year, and within a handful of years, they'll close because those savings will run out. Like, that's a reality that church has to be exposed to, right? So people are resistant to change, but they have to understand the cost, the real cost of not changing. Yeah. The status quo, I say this a lot with churches that I partner with, the status quo is a myth. You're either changing intentionally, or you're being so you have a voice in change, or you're becoming a victim of change. Change is happening to you.
Yeah.
And so you've got to speak that reality and that truth to your folks. AJ, anything to add there?
Yeah, this really should probably be number 1. And it is. I mean, when we work with churches, exposing them to reality really is one of the first elements that we go through. Again, we're talking about on the backside of decision-making process here in this list. But, the better people understand the current reality of the church, we're talking about budget realities, attendance realities, leadership realities, talent realities. There's a lot of things that can affect the future of the church, and so really that should be communicated well. Which communication is a big deal. That's something that we push a lot. Clear and consistent communication. So that'll help set the church up, maybe to not allow some of these other 4 negative things that we just talked about to even creep in. Right. If everybody understands where are we today and where are we going in the future, really, this should be a relatively small list of people that are giving you a hard time on these points. But
they can be a very vocal group.
They usually are.
Right.
Yeah.
It can feel like there's a mountain of them, which is why people will say things like churches don't want to change. No, there's a small percentage of people in churches that don't want to change. And so, but they're usually really loud. And as a pastor, if the loudest voice is the one that gets heard. And so you ignore the vast majority of the people in your church who are for it, but just aren't saying anything.
Yeah.
So
well, it's a microcosm of, the culture in general. Look at the political landscape in the United States and everything else. A lot of what we deal with is a relatively small minority of people, and they have got the loudest voices.
Yep.
So that carries over into the church too. We're all human. We're all sinners in need of a savior. And so unfortunately, the baggage is in the church walls as well as outside. So yeah, that's why we need great church leaders like you.
Yes. And by you, he means you, not me.
I'm looking at the camera, not you, Scott. I'd have to.
All right. Well, let's recap real fast. So how do we deal? So we've committed, our church is committed to change. What are 5 things that we can do to when we have people in our church who are resisting that change. Number one, just push ahead. Just ignore it. Just don't pay attention to it. Don't give in. Number two, respect but openly disagree with folks. So be kind and respectful, but you need to confront the ideas that they're saying if those ideas are not accurate, and the assumptions that are underlying them. Number three, confront and correct when necessary. I'd almost like to rephrase that: get ahead of problems. Whenever there's misinformation or disinformation, you want to be ahead of that and before it spreads. Four, don't tolerate sinful behavior. So when people get crazy on the gossip train, you've got to confront that. So deal with the idea publicly, the inaccuracy publicly, but deal with the person privately. And then finally, expose them to reality. And we could maybe rephrase that as keep exposing them to reality. So we're going to assume you've already done that to some extent, but you need to keep doing that. So anytime misinformation or disinformation comes up, or people go, well, why are we doing this? You're a year into it and you've seen a lot of change internally, but you've not necessarily seen the fruit from it. That's when people get frustrated. They go, we've made these changes and we're not seeing the fruit. You have to show them, remind them that, a woman gets pregnant, and then there's not a baby for 9 months, right? And you don't even, lots of times, she won't show for a long time. And you just can't see it. Just know that the change takes time. It takes time to birth something. And then after that, it's a baby and it requires extra energy and effort to grow it. It's a really apt metaphor because that's what change in the church is like. It takes time to incubate and grow, and then to nurture it and to see it come to fruition takes time. So don't give up. Keep the course, stay the course, and keep exposing folks to reality. I promise it's worth it. I promise your church can change. So we believe in it and we believe in you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for being with us on this almost but not quite live TMG Live. Scott, thanks. Thanks for bringing this topic to us this week. We hope to be back with you next week, typically on Tuesdays, 10 a.m. Central for TMG Live. We try to bring you good content that will help you in your ministry. Our ministry is helping your ministry. We love you guys. Appreciate you being with us. Thanks.
All right. Bye.